The White House is a symbol of America, the home of presidents since John Adams moved in 1800. Of course, it's seen its travails. In 1814, it was burned by the British, but for over 200 years, it has served as the home of presidents, as the site of important functions, and as the center of government for the executive branch. And so it should be no surprise that over time, things like the floors and the drapes and the carpets and the furniture have been replaced. In 1882, an uncharacteristically fancy and completely unexpected president decided to get rid of unwanted furniture in a way that seems more appropriate to suburbia than 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. At public auction, essentially a giant presidential rummage sale. It is history that deserves to be remembered. In the 1880 election, the Republican Party had to bridge two disparate sides. The so-called stalwart wing of the party, led by New York Senator Roscoe Conkling, which opposed civil service reform, and the half-breeds, who supported civil service reform. A fierce fight and 35 ballots at the Republican nominating convention led to the compromise ticket of the dark horse James Garfield, along with the stalwart Chester Arthur. Arthur had famously been part of Roscoe Conkling's New York political machine. He had been appointed the collector of the Port of New York, described as the prize plum of federal patronage, not just in this state, but perhaps in the country, outside of positions in the cabinet. The collector position was the highest paid position in the federal government, as pay was determined by a percentage of both collected customs duties and fines against those that attempted to evade payment. Additionally, the employees in the custom house were political appointees and were expected to donate part of their salaries to the party. Arthur, as collector of the port between 1871 and 1878, made more than $1 million a year when adjusted for inflation. Arthur had been the face of a major fight over civil service reform when Rutherford B. Hayes had removed him from the position, which set the tone for the fight at the 1880 Republican Convention. Garfield supported civil service reform, but Arthur was a very visible symbol of the wing of the party that supported the spoils system. The 1880 election was incredibly close in the popular vote, with neither party obtaining a majority. There is historical disagreement about the exact popular vote, with most historians agreeing that in a vote of over 8 million, the Republicans won by fewer than 10,000 votes. The official government tally puts the victory margin at fewer than 2,000 votes. The Electoral College vote was, however, decisive, 214 to 155. Garfield and Arthur were officially inaugurated on March 4th, 1881. Garfield's presidency would not last long. On July 2nd, he was walking with his Secretary of State, James Blaine, when a disgruntled and unstable office seeker named Charles Guiteau, who believed his work on the Garfield campaign entitled him to a diplomatic position, shot him in the back. Garfield lay sick for months in the White House, and an early air conditioner was installed in the White House in an attempt to keep the president cool while he recovered. Many doctors at the time didn't believe in antisepsis techniques or cleanliness to prevent infection. He died September 19th, after he had been brought to Elborn, New Jersey. Chester Arthur, as vice president, had expected very few responsibilities. At the time, vice presidents were expected only occasionally at the Senate when they were needed for important votes, and rarely otherwise. Arthur, who was at his home in New York City, took the first news of Garfield's death with fear. "I hope, my God, I do hope, it is a mistake." Official confirmation came soon after, and he was inaugurated in the early hours of September 20th. The condition of the White House in 1881 was poor. Nearly 70 years since its reconstruction after the 1814 burning, the House had seen better days. Congress didn't appropriate enough money for White House repairs and redecoration, although it was steadily modernizing with things like indoor plumbing and running water. Beginning in 1833, Congress increased the appropriation for redecoration for each incoming administration to $20,000, but it was often not enough to replace worn-out furniture and do necessary upgrades and repairs. Presidential wives attempted to get draperies and carpets to last another year. This was difficult, as before World War II, the grounds and even the White House itself were broadly open to the public without invitation or appointment. Backwoodsmen with their muddy boots, standing in line with diplomats. Mary Lincoln overspent by nearly $7,000 when she redecorated the White House in the 1860s. Arthur was not a man of simple tastes. He was known as the gentleman boss and elegant Arthur, and was rumored to own 80 pairs of pants, a ridiculous luxury for the time. He was called a novel species of president, a type that is represented by the well-dressed and well-bred New Yorker, the quiet man who wears a scarf and a pin in it and prefers a sack coat to the long-tailed frock coat. Arthur was also known for his lavish carriage, a dark green landau picked out with red, drawn by two perfectly matched mahogany bays with flowing manes and tails. The harness was mounted with silver. The lap rope for inside of the carriage was Labrador otter, lined with dark green and with CAA worked in the silk. Garfield's wife, Lucretia, had made plans to redecorate the White House, but had become sick shortly after the inauguration and was still recovering when her husband was shot. He had been on the way to the train station to travel to meet her. She accomplished little of her planned redecoration, but was well educated and had gone to the Library of Congress to study the history of the White House, hoping to bring a sense of history to it. Some furniture had been ordered, but almost everything had been paused after Garfield was shot. Arthur refused to even move into the White House before it was redecorated, more to his exquisite taste, and ordered the work to begin as soon as Lucretia moved out. In the meantime, he lived at a senator's house in Washington. Arthur's wife had died suddenly of pneumonia in January 1880, only months before Arthur was elected vice president, so Arthur's sister Mary took over most of the hosting jobs that a first lady was responsible for. Arthur, however, was keenly interested in the work that he ordered for the remodel, and oversaw it closely himself. William Henry Crook, who served the White House for more than 50 years, beginning in 1865, said that Arthur generally came to the executive mansion every evening after dinner and made a thorough inspection. Night after night, he would go from room to room and corridor to corridor, giving orders to change this and that according to his own taste. That taste was the height of opulence for the Victorian era, gilded and upholstered in lavish silks and inlaid silver. W.B. Moses and Son did much of the redecorating, including installing ebony chairs carved in the Japanese style that had been ordered by Lucretia Garfield in the East Room, as well as some other furniture that went to the Green Room. The furniture in the East Room included sofas, armchairs, side chairs, and corner chairs, and Moses and Son also replaced worn-out curtains and drapes. Wallpaper, drapes, and upholstery all saw significant wear during the previous administrations, partially because members of the public took souvenirs by cutting tiny pieces off. Andrew Johnson was known to cover chairs with slip covers because the upholstery was so damaged. In addition to Moses and Son, Arthur hired Louis Comfort Tiffany, son of and designing director of Tiffany & Company, to decorate the executive mansion. Tiffany's work was largely relegated to regilding and glasswork, for which he was already famous. In the White House's main corridor, the walls were painted pale olive, added gold leaf, and decorated the ceiling with gold and silver traceries that spelled out USA. Tiffany also did work in the state dining room, including regilding the surtout du table, originally purchased by James Monroe, a kind of richly detailed centerpiece, also called a plateau. The Washington Paper Evening Star said of the work that they have decorated the ceiling in broad lines and masses of metal, gold and ivory white, which, upon closer inspection, form intricate scrolls and designs, at night reflecting the rays from 3 large chandeliers. Arthur also oversaw the installation of the White House's first elevator, which had been ordered to be installed by Garfield, but which was never put in for fear that the sound of construction would disturb his recovery. Tiffany paid special attention to ceilings. According to Tiffany himself, the East Room's ceiling was decorated in silver with a design in various tones of ivory. The Red Room had a frieze in which the motif was an interlacing of design embodied both eagles and flags. Most impressive of Tiffany's work was the replacement of a clear glass screen that separated the entrance hall from the cross hall with a massive and fashionable piece of colored glass. Tiffany would do many colored glass works in his life. The piece that was installed in the White House was of opalescent glass. 50 feet in length and reaching from floor to ceiling, it had a motif of eagles and flags, along with a shield, stars, and the initials US. The screen is considered an important example of the aesthetic art movement, a movement defined by the slogan, art for art's sake, as opposed to having a specific ethical role. The large screen remained in place for 20 years, when it was, with most every other example of the Victorian style, removed by Theodore Roosevelt. The screen went to a hotel, and was later destroyed in a fire. Arthur finally moved into the White House in December of 1881. Of course, Arthur's redecoration brings to mind another question. What happened to the many old, worn-out, or outdated pieces of furniture, carpets, and other junk? In what appears to be the largest single removal of former presidents' goods left in the White House up to that time, Arthur had it packed up and sent to auction. The Vermont Phoenix of Battleboro, Vermont, recorded that 24 loads of cast-off furniture from the White House were sold, the first sale of the kind since Buchanan. Buchanan had sold at least 50 pieces of furniture in 1860, but Arthur sold not only the 24 wagon loads, but other articles, including 30 barrels of china. Today, even a worn-out piece of furniture from even a recent president would be considered to have historical value, and most people would hesitate before tossing it away. It isn't exactly clear what was sold at the auction. No detailed list of the items exists, but we know that the items were sold by the Duncanson brothers, auctioneers in Washington, D.C., on April 14, 1882. An ad for the sale in the Baltimore Sun lists unserviceable furniture, carpets, chandeliers, mantels, etc. from the executive mansion, comprising parlor suites, window hangings, armchairs, etc. It also lists carpets from the East Room and rosewood and other furniture in sofas, lounges, bedsteads, bureaus, washstands, screens, mattresses, etc. It was sold within the Duncanson Brothers auction rooms, and they advertised some antique articles and souvenirs among the items. Other lists include all the furniture from the East Room, which was described as moth-eaten, furniture from the Red Parlor and the Green Room, maps, marble fireplace mantels, a good-sized geographical globe that had belonged to Nellie Grant, a pair of high chairs that had been ordered by President Hayes, lead pipes, a pair of President Lincoln's trousers, and several rat traps, including, quote, a historical one in which the rat that ate up President Lincoln's suit of clothes had been caught. Newspaper reports say upwards of 5,000 people attended the auction, which raised about $6,000, the equivalent of over $165,000 today. The Wyandotte Gazette of Kansas City, Kansas, reported that it brought remarkably high prices, more than they originally cost. Former President Rutherford Hayes bought 2 wagons worth of furniture, including 2 mahogany serving tables bought during James Madison's administration, which now sit in Hayes' home, part of the Rutherford B. Hayes Presidential Library and Museums in Spiegel Grove, Ohio. Sadly, though, it's not known where most of the items went, including that historical rat trap. We're left wondering if someone actually wore Lincoln's trousers. The mantels were later missed. When Truman gutted the house between 1948 and 1952, the designers bemoaned that they had only 3 of the original 24 1818 mantels purchased during James Monroe's tenure. Truman's people would examine many mantels, including at least one sold at the 1882 auction to a scrap dealer, who sold it to a minister whose house was later destroyed. It was sold twice more before stashed under a porch and determined to have been a White House mantel from the 1840s. Arthur's casual sale of these unfashionable items seems shocking today, especially the utter lack of care. They didn't even carefully log what was taken and sold. But the redecoration spoke to a new city-bred man of a changing nation, less rural, more urbane, defined, of course, by the gold and opulence of the American Gilded Age. Since Arthur's time, many items have been sold or donated from the White House collection, although more modern presidents have generally relied on a large collection of carpets, desks, rugs, and furniture to furnish the residence, as well as the Oval Office. Congress now appropriates $100,000 per administration for redecoration, although some modern presidents have chosen instead to use private money for decoration. In 1961, Congress passed a law declaring the furnishings of the White House to be inalienable property of the White House, as well as legislating the House's status as a museum. The White House was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1960, and major changes are now circumscribed by law. What are you doing? I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguy.guild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you have to do is subscribe.